I love starting my hikes here. McLean Mill, National Historic Site near Port Alberni. It's a good place to start and end a railway hike in this area. It's about 2 hours after sunrise on a cloudy day. I'm going to go out to Smith Road and take the mill spur down to the E&N mainline. That mill spur, the railway track that comes across the road and into the mill property, operated from 2001 to 2018 when the tourism train went from Port Alberni station up to McLean Mill. I hope that it resumes in a future year. The Alberni Pacific Railway is working really hard to help make that happen, but it requires a lot of cooperation from other agencies. I'll just walk beside the railway for now. It's easier on the road, and then we'll get into the spur up ahead. This is a good time to mention our location, Vancouver Island on the west coast of British Columbia, and the red dot is just north of the city of Port Alberni. Here's a railway map, and we're looking at the Port Alberni Subdivision, which goes from right to left, Parksville to Port Alberni. And the red circle is the area of the hike north of Port Alberni. Here's a closer view of the Port Alberni area, and you can see Cameron Lake on the far right for context. The black is the railway route, and the red circle again is the area of my hike. Here's the close map of the area. Red circle is where I start and end my overall hike, McLean Mill, National Historic Site parking lot. Here's the first leg going down the mill spur to the junction, that's the red circle. And then I go in a clockwise direction on the E&N mainline, ending up at mile 28.9 bridge. That's the red circle on the right. And then I backtrack for a way and take a series of trails back to the McLean Mill site. And here's the portion of the hike that's covered by this particular video. I'm presenting some of the scenes of this first section as screenshots because my video was way too shaky. It's my fault for how I was holding my camera at the start of the hike, and I'm sorry about that. Don't worry, it gets better. The mill spur is fairly level here, but we're about to start going downhill at a fairly steep grade. This gives you an idea on the overgrowth on either side. This is likely going to be what I consider to be clean in the overall context of today's hike. Here's another mystery curve in the bush. I know what's coming up. I've been here before. We're coming up to a little small culvert bridge and then the junction. And here comes the junction with the main line. Gonna turn around here, just want to go as far as the switch. This junction is milepost 33.4 on the Port Alberni Subdivision main line. I'm facing Railway West towards Port Alberni, but not anymore. Here we are, Railway East. If we kept heading now straight on the main line, we'd eventually get to Parksville on the railway, but we're not going that far. Stepping back, you see that the switch is lined for the spur going off to the right and not the main line. And that's because the spur is what used to be authorized for movement, but there wasn't any authorized movement on the main line west of here. Or at least that's how I understand it. Okay, there's the mill spur that I just came from, heading off upgrade to the right. Last train activity there in 2018. That was the last year that the tourism train ran to the mill. And here I am on the main line, and the last regular train activity here would have been early January 2002. Then a few years later, there were a few logging trains that came up here for some short-term jobs, but those were one-offs. So it's been about 23 years since we've had a regular train activity here. So that's why I walk this railway. This is still owned and held as a railway, and so in a lot of ways it'll appear as if operations just ended and nothing's changed as they await the resumption of operations. Just that 23 years has passed in the interim. Coming up to Smith Road ahead. That's the road that I started out down, and I could have just continued on the road, but it's much more fun to take the railway. And we'll continue on straight on the other side. Looks like it gets a lot more overgrown with broom weeds. By the way, you'll notice a rattle in my video. This is the reason. Hanging around my neck is a whistle and an emergency light, and it's really close to where I hold my camera. Sorry about that. Okay, Smith Road. Looking towards Alberni Inlet. Up towards McLean Mill, around a few curves. This is mile 33.3. Mileage is counting down. Mile 0 is at Parksville Station. Here we go into the jungle. It's pretty, I admit, but I still hate the broom. The last time I did this hike, 13 months ago, April 2024. It's one that I try to do every year because I enjoy keeping track of the changes to the railway grade, usually because of Mother Nature pushing back. So I like to see what's new in terms of overgrowth and washouts and rock slides and windfall trees, and the occasional new logging road going across. Nice view through some logged area. Somewhere around here was milepost 33. I saw the post once in my first year doing this back in 2019, but the sign was missing. But I know it should be around here. As recent as June 2016, yeah, that's 9 years ago, a speeder tour came through here. It was an authorized group, part of NARCOA. That's North American Railcar Operators Association. And over the years they had done various tours on Vancouver Island's unused railways. But that was the last one, June 2016. So after that, a lot of the work to keep the railway passable stopped for various reasons. I think it was complicated and involved volunteer groups who had done their best. Lots of people have had dreams and hopes for this railway in the 23 years of inactivity. There still are people. Other than authorized volunteer groups in the first 16 years or so of inactivity, there hasn't been anything else officially done to maintain this section of railway. So it's kind of closed off. And in a way I like that because, again, it's quiet and it's a study of what happens when a railway is left to itself. Now, of course, there are other people that use this corridor, just like I'm using it right now for a hike. Other people use it for hiking or for ATVing, things like that. And I think that some of them take a role of maintaining this, of clearing windfalls, pushing rock falls out of the way, etc. And I've even seen evidence of broom plants being busted and cut off. So I'm thankful to all those people over the years. How far have I come? Oh, quite a ways. I'm still on the long tangent. So in 1911, this subdivision was opened. It was the early years of Canadian Pacific Railway ownership of the E&N Railway. And at the start it was passenger trains, a passenger lifeline to Port Alberni, to the east coast of the island, and industry. And there were many logging company spurs that branched off of this subdivision line. I've seen the charts for that. It's quite interesting. And in terms of big industry, well, that was the last customer, the pulp mill in Port Alberni, and they switched to trucks in late 2001. And then one last movement of equipment, early 2002, and that was it. And right now I'm thankful to be walking through evergreen trees and not broom weeds. And we're still going straight, a very long tangent. My affection for this subdivision comes from my love of island railway history, but also because it's quiet, and the areas that I like to walk, it totals about 21 miles, and I break it into about 6 different hikes that I try to do each of those once per year. It's areas far from settlements, so it's bush, mountain, areas like this. So I like the quiet, the undisturbed style of it, and to put it simply, I love walking in railway history. I enjoy this rock cut that we're coming to. It's also one of our significant curves. Just significant in that it's the first one in a long time. The first 2 miles of my hike today on the main line are mainly long, straight tangent segments with a few distinct curves, just like a regular railway elsewhere. And then later on, we'll start being Port Alberni Subdivision-like with many tight curves. Okay, coming out of the curve onto a straight stretch, and we are now heading geographically almost perfectly north towards the Beaufort Slope, the mountains. So yeah, I love this area. We'll head straight towards the Beaufort Slope and then make a very significant curve to the right. Here's an example of work done by people that care. I'm thankful for their work. This is fairly decent for brush area beside the railway. Nothing pushing me onto one side or the other. This is roughly where mile 32 is. I only saw the milepost once back on my first hike here in 2019. And after that it disappeared. I think when there was some logging being done close by the tracks here. Actually, I think the milepost 32 was closer to here.